Morris Burke had lived a life built on rhythm. Mornings started with black coffee in a porcelain mug, newspaper folded just so. Evenings were roast dinners, the clinking of silverware against china, and soft laughter drifting from the kitchen. His wife, Martha, with her neatly tied apron and ever-ready smile, moved like a melody through their Westchester home. On that particular evening, the scent of rosemary roast beef filled the air, and the clatter of dishes echoed softly against the hardwood floors. Everything, at a glance, seemed perfect. But perfection has a sound when it cracks. And for Morris, it began with a familiar chime. At exactly 7:45, as he reached for his wife's phone to make a business call, his own had gone dead. He noticed the light flicker on. A message had come through. His finger hovered over the dial pad when his eye caught the name. Dylan, his son-in-law. A man he had helped mentor, the husband of his only daughter. The message preview glowed innocently. He'll never find out. Documents almost ready. Morris froze. His hand, once steady from decades of negotiations and contract signings, trembled slightly. He stared at the words, simple but sharp as a blade. His thumb hesitated, then moved, not to dial, but to open. The message thread unfolded like a trapdoor beneath his feet. The conversation was detailed, startlingly so. Martha had been messaging Dylan over several days. They discussed timelines, asset divisions, legal strategies. The messages weren't vague or hypothetical. They were deliberate, calculated. Plans to initiate a divorce right after the Madison Avenue deal closed. Terms had already been discussed. Martha would receive the house and retirement accounts. Dylan would handle the paperwork and gain access to business assets through Ruby. Through Ruby, their daughter. The very idea twisted something deep inside him. Morris blinked hard, the words blurring and reshaping with each line he read. Martha had asked if he might suspect anything. Dylan had reassured her. Martha had expressed guilt about lying to Ruby. Dylan responded with chilling efficiency. Clean break, no messy emotions. In a daze, Morris closed the thread just as Martha's footsteps approached. She entered with the same calm grace he had known for nearly 4 decades, drying her hands on a towel. "Did you reach him?" she asked. He looked up, his face composed. The instincts of a businessman took over. "Just dialing now," he replied, voice even. As Johnson's voice buzzed through the line, talking terms and deadlines, Morris nodded and responded appropriately. But every word was underwater. Every phrase about escrow, property lines, and closing schedules held a new sinister undertone. Martha was waiting for this deal to close, for the assets to peak, before making her move. Smart. Cruel, but smart. Across the room, she hummed softly as she adjusted the table setting. The wine glasses caught the chandelier light just right. Morris had seen this scene 1,000 times. But tonight, it felt like a stage play, well-rehearsed, exquisitely performed, and entirely false. He hung up the phone and handed it back to her. "You really saved me there," he said. She smiled and touched his shoulder. "You look pale. Everything all right?" "Just tired," he lied. "Big deal." Dinner continued. Morris chewed slowly, nodding as Martha spoke about shopping and her sister and yoga. Each word was carefully noted, her pauses, her downward glances, her stories that did not line up. The sister she had supposedly visited was out of town last week. The new necklace on her collarbone looked nothing like a clearance item. Ruby had called earlier, Martha mentioned. Dylan was working on a big corporate case. Morris's hand tightened on his fork. He asked lightly, "What kind of case?" "Oh, client confidentiality." Morris nodded. Of course. Lawyers and their secrets. The rest of the evening passed like fog. He helped clear the table, loaded the dishwasher, watched a few minutes of television beside her without really seeing anything. When they climbed into bed, he waited until she drifted into sleep, breathing evenly beside him. In the dark, he stared at the ceiling, the light from the street casting long lines across the ceiling fan. 37 years. He thought of anniversaries, of hospital rooms after Ruby's birth, of dancing in the kitchen when no one was watching. And then he thought of Dylan's message again. Documents almost ready. The phone buzzed again on her nightstand. He didn't reach for it this time. Instead, he stared straight ahead and began to plan. 2 days passed like cold smoke, curling around Morris's thoughts and trailing behind every movement he made. He continued life as usual, responding to emails, confirming property contracts, sipping his morning coffee at the kitchen table, but something behind his eyes had changed. He no longer looked at Martha the same way. Her presence was now a series of quiet calculations. Each word she said became a data point in the unfolding betrayal. It was Wednesday when he decided to speak to Ruby. He texted her just after 11 in the morning. Lunch today? Central Park. Just us. Let me know. She replied within 5 minutes. 1 p.m. The bench near the pond? Perfect, he wrote. By the time Morris arrived, the park had settled into its midweek rhythm. Joggers had moved on, and the lunch crowd had started to thin. A few children tossed breadcrumbs at ducks in the water, their parents chatting on nearby benches. He chose a quiet spot beneath an oak tree, back to the wall of a hedge, just as he had planned. Ruby appeared at exactly 1 p.m., her stride purposeful, coat buttoned neatly, bag over her shoulder. She looked like the same little girl who used to run to him after school, only now taller, steadier, more focused. "Dad," she greeted warmly, embracing him. "It's been too long since we've done this." "Far too long," Morris agreed, managing a smile as they sat. A waitress came by and took their order. Morris asked for hot tea. Ruby ordered a salad and soup combo, then launched into stories about school. One of her students had called her mom by mistake, she said, laughing. She spoke of upcoming spring break and a difficult parent-teacher meeting from the day before. Morris nodded, laughed when needed, but his thoughts were pacing ahead. At the right pause, he spoke. "Has Dylan been acting differently lately?" Ruby tilted her head. "Differently how?" "Working late more than usual. Secretive. Unreachable sometimes." She shrugged. "He says he's working on something big. Corporate law stuff. Very confidential." Same words Martha had used. Morris studied her face carefully. She didn't seem to know. Her smile was soft, honest. There was no flicker of hesitation in her eyes, only curiosity and concern. She wasn't part of it. "Sweetheart," he said gently, "what I'm about to tell you will change everything." Ruby's smile faded. "Dad," she said, her voice quiet. "You're scaring me." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his own phone. After unlocking it, he scrolled to the photos he had taken of Martha's messages. He handed it across the table. "Last night I borrowed your mother's phone for a call," he said slowly. "I saw something I wasn't supposed to see." Ruby's brow furrowed. She leaned closer, reading. Silence followed. Her fingers scrolled slowly, stopping, going back, rereading. Her face shifted, from confusion to disbelief to growing horror. Then a stillness took over. "This can't be real," she whispered. "Mom would never. And Dylan—" "I know it's hard to accept," Morris said. Ruby's hands trembled as she continued reading. 60-40 split. Business assets through Ruby. Her lips tightened. "They're using me." Morris nodded. "While you were cooking him dinner. Trusting him." Her voice trembled. "All those late nights. All those vague excuses. He wasn't helping clients, he was planning to steal from you." "And from you," Morris said gently. "From us both." Ruby leaned back, staring at the pond. For a moment, it seemed the ducks and sunshine and children's laughter were from another world. Then she looked at her father. "What do we do about it?" Morris looked at her carefully. "You believe me?" "I just watched them plan to destroy everything. Of course I believe you." She sat up straighter. "We stop them." "It won't be easy," he warned. "Dylan knows the law. Your mother has been planning this for months." "Then we plan better." Her voice was firmer now. "What do you need me to do?" "Watch Dylan. Keep acting normal. Gather anything, documents, files, anything he leaves lying around. I need more than just messages. Ruby nodded. And Mom? I'll handle her. But this must stay between us. She looked him in the eye, unwavering. No one else will hear it from me. A pause. Then Morris added softly, You started the moment you believed me, instead of defending them. Ruby reached across the table and placed her hand on his. I'm sorry, Dad. For what they're doing. For what Dylan. I know. Her voice shook. I married him because I thought he was honorable. You couldn't have known, Morris said. They fooled both of us. But not anymore. Ruby straightened her shoulders. So what's our timeline? They plan to file at the end of the month. That gives us 2 weeks to gather evidence and prepare. 2 weeks, she echoed, to save your business and show them exactly who they're dealing with. Morris looked at her and, for the first time in days, felt something that resembled warmth. His daughter, the little girl who used to hold his hand crossing the street, was now sitting before him, strong, furious, loyal. Ruby, he said, his voice low, no matter what happens between your mother and me, you are the best thing I've ever accomplished. Tears glimmered in her eyes, but she stayed steady. We're going to win, Dad. They picked the wrong family to betray. As she stood to leave, calling it teacher duty, Morris watched her walk away, shoulders squared, stride confident. She was no longer just his daughter. She was his ally, and together, they were about to change everything. Morris sat alone in his home office, the soft ticking of the grandfather clock blending into the faint rustle of spring wind brushing the windows. A folder rested on his desk. Manila, plain, but heavy in meaning. It had arrived earlier that morning, hand-delivered by a quiet man in a dark blazer. Inside were photographs. He had not looked at them yet. The envelope still lay sealed, like a final line he had not yet crossed. And yet, he had paid for them, asked for them, needed them. The truth was already known, but seeing it, that would make it real. His phone buzzed once on the desk. A message from Ruby. Be careful with the photos. Let me know if you want to talk. He took a slow breath, slid his finger under the flap, and opened the folder. Photo after photo spilled out like confessions. Martha at the Plaza Hotel, walking hand in hand with a tall man half her age. At first, Morris didn't recognize him. Then it clicked. Mike Rodriguez, the fitness instructor from the yoga studio she had spoken about for months. There they were again at a bistro in Soho, seated close, sharing wine. Then at Cartier, Martha laughing as Mike kissed her cheek, shopping bags on her arm. Morris set the photo down carefully. He wasn't angry, not in the way he would have been as a younger man. The fury had passed. What remained was something colder, heavier, a kind of clarity. When he walked back into the kitchen, Martha was at the stove. She wore a pale green sweater and hummed a familiar tune, some melody from their early years. The roast chicken was already in the oven, and the air smelled like herbs and lemon. It was a good smell, deceptive now. I've been looking at our expenses, Morris said, holding up a few printed receipts he'd pulled from the company records. Some of these charges seem unusually high. Martha turned slightly, spatula in hand. Like what? $3,000 a month at Manhattan spas, $500 at Tiffany's last week. Her eyes flicked toward him, then back to the pan. She smiled, but the warmth didn't reach her voice. Honey, I'm just taking care of myself. Is that wrong? No, he said gently, but shouldn't we discuss expenses that large? Martha turned fully now, drying her hands. Morris, you're making me feel like I need permission to spend money. After 37 years of marriage. The shift was subtle, practiced. Turn the pressure around. Make him the unreasonable one. He tilted his head, keeping his tone mild. I'm just trying to understand our budget better. You've never worried about money before. She stepped closer, touched his shoulder. Are we having financial problems? She asked, concern laced into her voice. Morris smiled faintly. The Madison deal alone should bring in close to $2 million. She blinked at the number. Then I suppose you're just being cautious. You work too hard, she said. That's the problem. Maybe I should cut back on spa treatments. We could both use more time together. There it was again, that perfect pivot. Sacrifice just enough to keep the lie intact. Present herself as the caring wife, ready to compromise. Don't cut back on anything, Morris said. He gathered the receipts, feigning acceptance. After all these years, you've earned the right to pamper yourself. Martha beamed. That's why I love you. You always listen to reason. Later that evening, they sat on the couch. A nature documentary played on television. Martha curled beside him with a glass of wine, commenting on migrating birds. Morris nodded, smiled, and sipped his tea. But inside, he was remembering the photo from outside Cartier, her eyes alight, laughing at something Mike had said. She had never laughed that way at his jokes. They went to bed like usual. Martha kissed his cheek, turned off her lamp, and within minutes her breath fell into steady rhythm. Morris stared at the ceiling. He thought about all the signs he had missed. The yoga classes that ran suspiciously late. The sudden interest in reviewing retirement documents. The new pieces of jewelry, always clearance finds. Her casual avoidance when Ruby was mentioned. The warmth in her eyes. Gone, though he hadn't noticed the exact day it faded. He rolled onto his side, watching the shadows shift across the room. The next morning, he stood at the mirror, tying his tie with practiced ease. Downstairs, Martha was making coffee, humming again. He could hear the soft clink of ceramic mugs. On his desk, he laid out the photos from Chen's file. Next to them, he added a new folder labeled Financials. Inside were credit card statements, business withdrawals, receipts. Quiet theft disguised as routine life. Then he opened a third folder and titled it Strategy. He wrote one word at the top of a blank page. Dinner. Saturday arrived with a soft breeze and the warmth of early April, the kind of day that made the world feel harmless. Birds chirped in the garden and the sunlight danced across the hardwood floors of the Burke residence. Inside, Martha moved with delighted anticipation. The kitchen buzzed with the aroma of herbs and roasting chicken. The crystal glasses were already set, and the wedding china gleamed beneath the chandelier. It was the kind of family dinner she once used to host often. Only this time, she believed it was her idea. Morris had played his part perfectly. That morning, he had brought her coffee in bed. French roast with cream, exactly as she liked it. He had apologized for being unreasonable about money. He had suggested the dinner casually, like an olive branch. Just like old times, he had said. Martha had smiled, relieved. She was certain she had regained control. By 6:30, the table was ready. At exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell chimed. Ruby and Dylan arrived right on time. Ruby wore a simple blue blouse, hair tied back, face calm but unreadable. Dylan, as always, looked confident and relaxed, a man used to controlling conversations and contracts. Something smells amazing, Dylan said, loosening his tie as he stepped inside. Martha's famous roasted chicken, Morris said with a smile. She never misses. They sat down, glasses filled, napkins folded neatly. The clink of cutlery and murmured pleasantries filled the room. It was all so familiar, dangerously so. Morris studied each of them carefully. Martha, glowing with pride, laughing softly at Dylan's compliments. Dylan, cutting into the chicken with gusto, praising her culinary skills. Ruby, composed, watching her husband like someone observing a stranger in a museum. To family, Morris said, raising his glass. To the bonds that hold us together. They all echoed it, crystal chiming in the warm light. For a moment, it almost felt real. Then Morris stood. I'll go get dessert, he said. He didn't head toward the kitchen. Instead, he walked to his study and returned carrying 5 manila folders, not plates. He placed one in front of Martha, one in front of Dylan, one in front of Ruby, and kept 2 for himself. Martha looked up, puzzled. What's this? Where's the pie? I thought this would be more interesting than dessert, Morris said, still standing. His voice was calm, even gentle, but every word landed like a stone. Dylan opened his folder first. Ruby leaned in beside him. The color drained from Dylan's face as he saw the legal documents inside. Photocopies of asset division plans, handwritten notes about timelines, annotated breakdowns of business assets. Ruby's eyes flicked across the pages. You knew about this? Dylan whispered to her. I knew about your greed, Ruby replied coldly. Your willingness to betray my father while pretending to love our family. Dylan reached for her hand. You don't understand the legal. I understand enough, Ruby cut in. I understand that while I made you dinner, you were planning to steal everything from my father. Dylan tried to speak again, but Morris turned his attention to Martha. Your turn, he said. Martha opened her folder. Photographs spilled out across the table. The Plaza Hotel. A restaurant in Soho. Mike Rodriguez's arm around her shoulder. The kiss outside Cartier. The receipts followed. Spa treatments, gifts, hotel bills, all paid from joint accounts. Martha's hand trembled. Where did you get these? Professional investigators, Morris said softly. Very thorough ones. It's not what it looks like. It is exactly what it looks like. Morris opened his second folder, revealing financial documentation. Thousands in unexplained charges, credit card records, duplicated withdrawals, all carefully cataloged. Martha leaned back, eyes wide. Morris, I can explain. There's no need, he said. Every lie is already written down. Then he turned to Ruby. I'm sorry you had to see this. Ruby stood suddenly. Her voice shook, but only from anger. How could you do this? She said to Dylan. I trusted you. I married you. Ruby, please, Dylan said. Let's go outside and talk. She slapped him. The sound was sharp, final. Dylan flinched, stunned. Don't you dare talk about love, she said. Not after what you planned. She grabbed her bag and headed for the door. Dylan stumbled after her, calling her name, but the door slammed before he could reach her. Silence returned to the dining room. Morris remained standing. Martha sat frozen, surrounded by the wreckage of her false world. The centerpiece of white roses now seemed ridiculous. The chicken on the table sat untouched, cooling in silence. Morris, she said finally, her voice barely audible. What happens now? He began collecting the folders calmly, one by one. Now, he said, you discover what happens when you betray someone who knows how to plan ahead. Martha's eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean for it to go this far, but it did, he said. And now, it's time to face it. He paused at the door. You should call a lawyer, he added. You're going to need one. Then he left the dining room and walked into the quiet of the house, leaving behind the woman who had once been his entire world, and was now just a name on a legal form. The morning after the confrontation passed in strange quiet. The house no longer smelled like roast chicken or cinnamon candles. It smelled like dust and paper, as if the air itself had changed overnight. Martha didn't come down for breakfast. Morris didn't call her. He didn't need to. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been presented, neatly, professionally, and without apology. He spent the morning in his office, stacking folders, reviewing files one last time. The sun came in through the window and touched the gold edge of the family photo on his desk, an older image, one where Ruby was still in high school, and Martha stood beside him in a summer dress. They were smiling, the kind of smile that only existed when truth had not yet been tested. At 10:15, Morris called James Williams. We're ready, he said. By noon, he was sitting in Williams's corner office on the 42nd floor of a midtown building, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows and quiet authority. The attorney reviewed the evidence with the precision of a surgeon. Surveillance photographs, financial documentation, legal messages, all in order. In 30 years, Williams said, I've seen all kinds of divorce cases, but rarely one this clean-cut. Morris nodded. He didn't need drama. He needed resolution. Emergency filing? He asked. Williams smiled faintly. Already in motion. With the strength of this evidence, I expect the court to move swiftly. Good. And the business assets? Morris asked. Protected. Dylan's involvement creates an ethical conflict. We'll file a formal complaint with the Bar Association. His role as your legal advisor while plotting behind your back is grounds for disbarment. Morris's hands folded calmly in his lap. He wasn't one to gloat. But justice, when it moved like this, had a gravity of its own. That evening, he returned home to find Martha sitting in the living room. Her makeup was untouched, her hair pulled back simply, her posture less composed than usual. A glass of untouched wine sat beside her. She looked up as he entered. "Morris," she said quietly, "please." He said nothing. "I made a mistake," she continued. "A terrible one. I wasn't thinking clearly." "You were thinking clearly enough to divide retirement accounts behind my back," he replied. She stood, voice rising just slightly. "It wasn't all lies. I loved you once." Morris met her gaze. "Once, but not enough to stay loyal." "I was scared you would leave me with nothing," she said, the words falling fast. "Dylan told me you were moving assets, preparing to cut me out. So you teamed up with him to beat me to it?" She didn't respond. Morris continued. "Mike Rodriguez. Hotels. Jewelry. Lies about yoga. Do those fall under mistakes so too?" Her eyes brimmed with tears. "Please. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll end it with Mike. I'll do anything." Morris shook his head gently. "The woman I married wouldn't need a second chance." She stepped forward. 37 years. "I was faithful for every one of them," he said, "even when I shouldn't have been." She froze, tears slipping down her face. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "What will it take to undo this?" "There's nothing left to undo," Morris replied. "Tomorrow, I'm filing for divorce. My lawyer already has everything prepared." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look away. And then he turned and walked upstairs, leaving her alone in the quiet, just the soft clink of the wine glass as she reached for it and thought better. The next morning, Ruby met him for coffee at a quiet diner near the courthouse. She wore no makeup. Her eyes were tired but focused. A legal folder sat beside her plate. "More documents," she said, sliding it over. Morris opened it. Dylan's handwritten notes. Final division plans. A post-dated email draft addressed to Martha. "After filing, we disappear for a month. Let it settle." "He was planning to leave me too," Ruby said. "Use me, then walk away." Morris placed his hand over hers. "You deserve better." She nodded. "We both do." They sat in silence for a while, the clatter of breakfast plates and the hiss of the espresso machine behind them. Then Ruby said, "So, what happens next?" Morris looked up from the folder. "We go to court. We win." She hesitated. "And after that?" He looked out the window, watching the morning traffic pass. "We build something better, something honest." Ruby smiled softly. "We already started." The morning of the court hearing arrived with gray skies and steady rain. Morris stood beneath the stone arch of the New York Family Court building, briefcase in hand, umbrella folded at his side. A doorman held the door for him. He nodded once, stepped inside, and began to ascend. James Williams met him at the security checkpoint. Impeccably dressed as always, the attorney extended his hand. "Courtroom 314, he said. They walked side by side through marble corridors. Across the lobby, Martha stood with her attorney, Patricia Knox. She looked smaller somehow, no longer the vibrant hostess or the woman who swayed through their kitchen humming. Her eyes met Morris's briefly. He didn't look away. Ruby was already seated in the gallery. She gave her father a soft smile, one hand resting on the folder in her lap. Her presence anchored him. The courtroom was quiet. Judge Thompson entered, gray hair neatly pulled back, glasses low on her nose. She took her seat with the authority of someone who had seen every type of story unfold, and had long since stopped being surprised. "The case of Burke versus Burke," the bailiff called out. James Williams stood. "Your Honor, We are submitting irrefutable documentation of adultery and conspiracy. The defendant engaged in a prolonged affair and a calculated plan, in cooperation with a legal advisor, to defraud the plaintiff of marital and business assets. Knox across the aisle rose slowly. Your Honor, we acknowledge the submitted evidence, but wish to emphasize the emotional context. 37 years of marriage. Present your documentation, Judge Thompson interrupted. Williams moved efficiently. On the screens before the judge appeared the surveillance photographs. Martha and Mike at the Plaza Hotel, holding hands, sharing wine, entering rooms together. Then the credit card statements. Charges to jewelry stores, hotel suites, expensive restaurants. Knox shifted. Your Honor, marital struggles. Continue, the judge said, eyes never leaving the screen. Then came Dylan's documents, copies of asset division plans, legal timelines, notes indicating coordinated filing. Williams concluded, the defendant's co-conspirator is a licensed attorney, also the plaintiff's son-in-law, who used his position to gather insider information and mislead both parties. We've filed with the New York Bar. Judge Thompson turned to Ruby. Miss Burke, you've submitted a sworn statement? Ruby stood. Yes, Your Honor. And you confirm the documents were photographed from your husband's files? Yes, I reviewed them before leaving him. Thank you. You may be seated. Knox made one last attempt. Your Honor, the emotional toll. The evidence is clear, the judge said. Adultery is not in dispute. Neither is the conspiracy. Asset division will reflect a significant breach of marital trust. Her gavel struck the wood once. 80-20 division. All business assets, properties, and retirement accounts remain with Mr. Burke. Defendant is awarded limited spousal support for a transitional period. The courtroom fell into a soft hush. Morris closed his briefcase. Williams leaned over. Congratulations. It's done. Ruby rose from the gallery, crossed the aisle, and embraced her father. You did it, she whispered. Justice won. Outside, the rain had lightened into mist. Cars passed on wet streets. Martha exited through another door, walking alone beneath a small umbrella. Her lawyer trailed behind her, speaking in low tones. She did not look back. Morris and Ruby stood together at the courthouse steps. 37 years, he murmured. Ruby squeezed his hand. But the last 6 months showed who people really are. He looked at her and smiled. And you, Ruby, are exactly who I always hoped you'd be. They walked together down the steps, the sidewalk stretching wide before them. A new chapter was waiting. Not perfect, but clean, honest. And Morris Burke, the man once betrayed, now walked forward, unburdened. In the quiet aftermath of courtroom battles and shattered illusions, what lingered most was not the sound of the gavel or the weight of legal documents. It was the silence. The silence of knowing who had stayed, and who had chosen to leave long before they were ever caught. Morris Burke had walked a road no one wishes to take, paved with betrayal by those he trusted most. And yet, he walked it without vengeance, without shouting, without violence. Just clarity, patience, and a calm that only comes when the truth is finally undeniable. Perhaps that's the real mark of strength. Not how loudly we react, but how steadily we respond. Morris could have burned everything down. Instead, he built something better from the ashes. He protected what he had earned, preserved his dignity, and more importantly, reconnected with the only relationship in his life that had never faltered, his bond with Ruby. This story was never about revenge. It was about recognition. Recognition of your worth, your contributions, your instincts. Recognition that being overlooked, underestimated, or even betrayed does not make you weak. It makes your rise all the more meaningful. There is a lesson in that for all of us, especially as we grow older. Trust is a beautiful thing, but blind trust can be a dangerous comfort. And when that trust is broken, the answer is not to lash out, but to quietly, carefully reclaim what is yours. Just like a lighthouse stands still in a storm, Morris stood firm as the waves of deceit crashed around him. And when the tide receded, it was not the chaos that remained. It was the light. The true triumph of Morris's story is not that he won in court. It's that he didn't lose himself in the process. He proved that justice doesn't always need noise to make itself heard. Sometimes it arrives in a quiet man's briefcase, carried step by step until truth speaks louder than betrayal ever could. Like a simple porch light left on through the night, one quiet act of self-respect can guide us through our darkest seasons. So perhaps the next time you're faced with a truth that breaks your heart, remember Morris. Sit with it, study it, and then do something extraordinary. Choose dignity. Choose clarity. Choose to rise, even if no one expects you to. And if this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of your own strength or someone you know who's been quietly holding the world together, consider sharing it. Someone out there may need to hear that it's never too late to stand tall, to start fresh, or to be seen for who they really are.